Here's a hard truth most people don't want to face. You cannot use logic to defeat someone who has no desire to understand, because what's protecting them is not knowledge, it's ego and pure self-defense. The harder you push to win the argument, the more energy you lose, the more composure you lose, and the more you give up your position. If you want out, you have to see what this game really is. Think back to the worst argument you have ever been in. The moment when you had every hard piece of evidence in your hands. The numbers were right there. They did not lie. And your chain of reasoning was so airtight it felt like even a stone wall would have to crack under it. You smiled to yourself. You thought truth was about to win. You thought in just a few more seconds, reality would break through, and the person across from you would have no choice but to back down. But then the other person, someone who did not even understand the most basic foundation of the topic, smirked and tossed out one dead, flat sentence. "I don't think so. That's just your opinion. No evidence. No reasoning. No real argument. Just a cold, shameless refusal." Your heartbeat spikes. Your chest tightens. The heat rushes straight to your head. And in that moment, you realize too late that you have already fallen into a deep, dark hole no one warned you about. What destroys you in that moment is not their ignorance. The tragedy is this. It is your intelligence. The very thing you have always been proud of suddenly turns into a blade pointed back at your own mind. If you have ever felt that level of frustration, that choking rage, that sense of total disbelief, then what you are about to hear may finally set you free. So stay with me, because what we are about to uncover will break apart every naive belief you still have about truth, logic, and how human beings actually operate. And by the end of this, you may realize that the real escape was never where you thought it was. Before we step into this darker world of cognitive traps, if this story already feels painfully familiar, subscribe to the channel now. That support helps us keep making content that exposes the raw truth of human psychology with even more depth in the future. Welcome, everyone. Most of us carry a very innocent illusion. We think logic is the universal language of humanity. We think truth is light. We think if we present facts clearly enough, that light will drive out the darkness of stubbornness. But that is where we are wrong. The moment you bring the mind of a scientist into a conversation with someone devoted to stubbornness, you are making a fatal mistake. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman exposed part of this tragedy when he described the human mind as operating through two systems. System 1 is the kingdom of instinct, of raw emotion, of fast reactions that happen before thought even has a chance to speak. System 2 is something very different. It is slow, heavy, demanding. It requires checking, analyzing, comparing, correcting, and spending real mental effort. And here is the bitter truth. Ignorant people live almost entirely inside System 1. They cling to bias. They react from shallow likes and dislikes. They protect whatever makes them feel safe. And the terrifying part is this. It barely costs them any energy to do it. But you see yourself as intelligent. So you mobilize System 2. You search for data. You organize your thoughts carefully. You weigh consequences. You shape a complex reality into the clearest form you can possibly offer another person. You bring a quantum supercomputer to a game your opponent is deciding with rock, paper, scissors. That is how absurd this battle really is. It is like trying to play chess with a pigeon. It does not matter how brilliant your moves are. The pigeon will still jump onto the board, knock the pieces everywhere, leave a mess behind, and strut off like it won. And once you get trapped inside that dynamic, you begin a slow intellectual suicide. A painful one. Look at the cognitive load you are carrying in that moment. Every argument you make lights up millions of neurons. You burn energy trying to stay calm, trying to stay precise, trying not to let your anger explode. Meanwhile, the other person enjoys the highest privilege ignorance can offer, the right to refuse understanding. They can throw some ridiculous conspiracy theory in your face in 3 seconds. And then you spend 3 hours researching, checking, and mentally exhausting yourself just to prove those 3 seconds were garbage. That brutal imbalance of energy makes every attempt to enlighten them an act of self-destruction. The harder you fight to prove you are right, the deeper you sink into irritation, exhaustion, and emotional instability. And the sickest part? They often stand there enjoying it. They feel a twisted satisfaction when they realize they have successfully disturbed someone who clearly knows more than they do. There is a cruel truth about life that almost no school will ever teach you. In the kingdom of the blind, the one-eyed man is not crowned king. He is tied to a post and burned alive for daring to say the world has color. Once you see yourself burning in that kingdom of the blind, you are forced to face the invisible weapon protecting them, the supreme arrogance of ignorance. Why can a person deny obvious reality right in front of their face and feel no guilt, no shame, not even the smallest tremor of inner discomfort? The answer lies in a psychological phenomenon David Dunning and Justin Kruger exposed. The Dunning-Kruger effect is not just about incompetent people failing to recognize their incompetence. It is darker than that. It is a sedative, a drug, a mental narcotic that lets them sleep peacefully inside the illusion of their own greatness. When a person lacks the knowledge needed to understand a problem, they also lack the mental tools required to realize they are wrong. They are trapped inside a prison of ignorance. But inside their own mind, that prison feels like a palace, a throne room, a place where they believe they hold the truth. So when you show up with science, statistics, and evidence, trying to point out the cracks in those walls, you think you are helping. You think you are removing the blindfold. You think you are offering light. But that is not how they experience it. To them, you are not a guide. You are a threat. You are a destroyer. You are the one showing up with a bomb, ready to blow up the worldview they built with blind belief and emotional comfort. For people trapped in System 1 thinking, their ego and their opinion are fused together. Their identity is wrapped around their beliefs so tightly that separating the two feels like violence. So the moment you challenge the opinion, their nervous system does not treat it like an exchange of ideas. It treats it like a survival threat. It feels, at a biological level, like being attacked. Their brain triggers fight or flight. And because they do not want to run from a conversation, they are desperate to win. They choose the most primitive weapon available: flat-out denial. If you have ever felt powerless in front of someone like this, drop a 1-inch the comments. That is why your logic bounces right off them. You are not talking to an independent thinker. You are talking to a biological defense system. They are not listening to understand. They are waiting for you to pause long enough so they can jump in with some short, hollow, dismissive line that still lands like a direct hit to your self-respect. They use aggression to cover ignorance. They use volume to disguise weakness. They use certainty to hide confusion. And the real tragedy is what happens afterward. When the argument is over, their brain often rewards them. It releases dopamine. It gives them the chemical satisfaction of feeling like they successfully defended their beliefs from a dangerous enemy. They go to sleep smiling like a general who just won a war, completely unaware of how exposed and small they actually looked. That is what makes the arrogance of ignorance such a perfect shield. It blocks every arrow of logic you fire and leaves you standing there shocked, furious, and slowly beginning to question yourself. Once you finally see how solid and merciless that fortress of ignorance really is, a more disturbing truth begins to appear. You are not completely innocent in this tragedy. The thing keeping you trapped in these pointless battles is not just the other person's stubbornness. It is also a chronic disease inside you. An addiction. The addiction to being right. People with sharp minds and strong knowledge often carry a dangerous blind spot. They turn truth into a religion, and they cast themselves as the holy warrior whose duty is to defend that religion to the very end. So when someone says something false, reckless, or absurd, you do not just disagree. You feel a moral urge to correct it, to fix it, to expose it, to tear the lie apart. And on the surface, that sounds noble. It sounds principled. It sounds like integrity. But stop for a second and look deeper. Are you really fighting for truth? Or are you secretly feeding your intellectual ego? Are you really trying to protect reality? Or are you chasing that private emotional reward that comes from proving you are the smarter person in the room? Every time you argue with a stupid comment online, every time you turn red trying to reason with a stubborn family member at the dinner table, you are trading away the most precious assets you have. Your time, your energy, your nervous system. And the cost is not just a few wasted minutes. It becomes a chain reaction inside your mind. Because when the argument ends in a deadlock, it does not really end. It follows you. You carry it into your meal. You carry it into your shower. You carry it into bed. You keep replaying the conversation, inventing the devastating lines you should have said, building the perfect response long after the moment is gone. You soak in the poison of your own resentment, and while you are doing that, the other person may already be relaxed, laughing at something stupid or living their evening as if you never existed. That is how insane the trade really is. You imprison yourself for someone who does not deserve 1 second of your mental life. And it gets worse. The more often you clash with ignorance, the more it can erode your faith in people altogether. Intelligence, when used in the wrong places, becomes a curse. It makes you bitter, guarded, cynical, always ready to flare up. You start seeing stupidity everywhere, and eventually, your heart closes. You stop noticing the simpler beauties of life because your mind is constantly scanning for nonsense to fight. That is ignorance's most devastating revenge against intelligence. It does not need to defeat you with better arguments. It defeats you by dragging you down into the mud of hatred, by stealing your peace, by turning you into someone obsessed with feeding on other people's mistakes. You may win the point, but lose the day. You may prove the fact, but lose your calm. You may be right in the argument, and still lose something far more valuable than the argument was ever worth. That is the hidden disease, not just their ignorance, your compulsion to wrestle with it. And until you see that clearly, you will keep mistaking self-destruction for moral courage. Once you are standing in the ashes of your own exhaustion, once you realize how expensive it is to keep needing to be right, the only real path to survival is not sharpening your sword. It is learning how to smile and put the weapon down. It is time to redefine silence. Because for most of your life, your pride has probably taught you one thing. If you stay silent, you lose. If you step back, you surrender. If you do not respond, you let them win. But in psychology, in deep self-mastery, and in Stoic philosophy, silence in the face of ignorance is not weakness. It is one of the highest forms of inner strength. Marcus Aurelius, one of Rome's greatest emperors, left behind a truth sharp enough to cut through pride. You are not responsible for turning yourself into a healer for every madman you meet on the road. Truth is precious, and precious things should never be thrown at people who are swinging sticks and smashing everything around them. The art of strategic withdrawal begins with one cold realization: other people's minds are not your territory. You cannot pry open someone's skull and force light inside if they have already pledged loyalty to darkness. So next time you find yourself standing across from a pigeon ready to destroy the chessboard, try using a sentence that works like a psychological disarmament spell. You may be right. That's an interesting perspective. Saying that does not mean you have lost your dignity. It means you have drawn a steel boundary around your energy. You let their ego float upward into its own fantasy. You leave them basking in the fake glory they crave. And you walk away with your nervous system intact. If from today on, you choose to stop fighting this kind of battle, comment 1. Refusing to enter a stupid war takes enormous self-control. Your chest will still tighten. Your pride will still scream for a comeback. Your ego will still beg for one last clean sentence that crushes them. But train yourself to breathe. Pause. Then picture a child screaming on the floor in the middle of a tantrum. You would not kneel down and debate that child like an equal. So why do it here? Real intelligence is not measured by how brutally you can dismantle someone's argument. It is measured by how quickly you can recognize the difference between an honest discussion and an energy trap. And when it is a trap, silence is the strongest statement you can make. It says, I value myself too much to throw my mind into this swamp. It says, I refuse to let your chaos rent a room in my head. It says, my peace is more valuable than your approval. That is not retreat born from fear. That is withdrawal born from power. That is strategic mercy toward yourself. And once you understand that, you stop confusing reaction with strength. You stop equating noise with victory. You stop giving every fool access to your emotional bloodstream. Once the art of silence sinks deep enough into your awareness, one final truth appears. And this truth can free you for good. You need a completely new definition of victory. For most of our younger years, especially when pride still drives us, victory looks like domination. It looks like the other person going quiet. It looks like the crowd agreeing with us. It looks like standing above the ruins of an argument we just destroyed. But that kind of victory is cheap. It is ego theater. It is toxic glory, and it bleeds the person who carries it. Real victory looks nothing like that. Real victory the kind worthy of a mature and truly free human being, looks like inner stillness that cannot be shaken. True freedom does not come from proving to the world that you are smarter than other people. It comes from no longer needing to prove it. That changes everything, because once you see that clearly, you realize truth does not shrink just because some ignorant person refuses to acknowledge it. The earth is still round even if someone insists it is flat. Fire is still hot even if someone argues that it is cold. Reality does not collapse just because a fool rejects it. So, your job is not to become the lawyer defending the universe. The universe does not need your defense. Your job is to protect your inner peace, to use the intelligence you have been given to build something real, to shape your life, to create value, to connect with people who actually operate on the same wavelength of thought and depth. Let ignorant people keep swimming in their small pond. Do not drag them toward the ocean. To them, the ocean feels like death. The highest form of intelligence is not a brain packed with facts and always ready to unload them at every falsehood it sees. The highest form of intelligence is wiser than that. It includes discernment, compassion, restraint, the ability to let go of the fantasy that you can control how other people think, the ability to smile, step back, and let truth move at its own pace. When you finally do that, a strange kind of relief floods your mind. The burden drops. You stop being a prisoner of pointless arguments. You stop being baited by shallow provocation. You move through life like a deep river, quiet on the surface, powerful underneath. Thank you for staying through this hard but necessary reflection. And if this journey touched some hidden corner inside you, leave a sign of that connection. Walk with us as we keep exploring the deepest layers of the human mind. Life is short, and mental energy is one of the few resources you can never fully recover once it has been wasted. Through the lens of psychology and philosophy, one truth becomes brutally clear. Draining yourself by arguing with ignorance is one of the worst investments a person can make. The Dunning-Kruger effect, combined with the massive ego of people who know too little, creates a wall so solid that even the sharpest logic often cannot break through it. And when you blindly keep trying to smash that wall, you do not just get hurt. You exhaust yourself. You poison your own inner life. You become a victim of your own addiction to being right. That is why the highest level of maturity is not found in endless verbal combat. It is found in the art of silence, in strategic withdrawal, in knowing when not to enter the fight. Silence here is not cowardice. It is armor. It is emotional discipline. It is the shield that protects your inner peace. The greatest victory is not forcing the world to admit you were right. It is reaching a level of freedom where you no longer feel compelled to prove anything to people who are operating on a completely different level of awareness. Let truth defend itself, and use your intelligence, your time, and your life force to build something tangible instead of trying to save people who are committed to staying blind. If right now you choose to keep your energy for your own life, leave a 1 as your sign, and from there, the deepest lesson becomes impossible to ignore. Real intelligence is not measured by how many arguments you win. It is measured by your ability to recognize which battles are not worth starting. Truth exists independently of the ignorant person's approval. So protecting the peace and energy of your own mind will always matter more than trying to enlighten someone who has already chosen blindness. In real life, the next time you see a ridiculous attack in a comment section or face a stubborn person defending something obviously false, use the 3-second rule. Pause for 3 seconds. Do not let your fight response take over immediately. Take one deep breath and ask yourself, is this argument really worth the joy of my entire day? Then practice disarming phrases like, that's an interesting perspective. I respect your view. That is how you cut the power line of conflict before it drains you. And then use the time and energy you just saved to read a page of a book, finish a piece of meaningful work, or say something loving to the people who actually value you. And now, I want to ask you something real. Have you ever spent an entire day emotionally wrecked just because you were trying to prove you were right in one pointless argument? Leave your answer in the comments and share your perspective so others can learn from it too. And if this message gave you a moment of clarity, a moment of awakening, or something useful to carry into your life, take 1 second to subscribe. Your support is what helps us keep creating deeper, more meaningful content moving forward.